Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Mejia, and as Tammy mentioned, I work out of the Woodland Hills office. So my home board is the Van Nuys office, and I am also familiar with a lot of the SoCal boards as well. I was asked to share a fun fact about myself, and I came up with, I have 1.5-year-old beagle, so I am a beagle mom, and sometimes she does come to the office with me and will chime in when I'm on the phone. So that's always fun.
Good, thank you. Thank you. I'm Tim Mussack. I'm with Bradford Barthel, the Sacramento office. I have a claims background. I'm not an attorney, and I do training on PD ratings, primarily what I do. So we're going to go today. And am I ready to start about the money chart, Tammy?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just want to point out, we have this on our website. This is a 2024 edition of the money chart. Everybody's got money charts, but I just want to, so we're talking about COLA and the annual checkup. I just want to discuss and point out stuff that's new for 2024. What isn't new is any PD values. They're still all the same. Been no changes on that. Because our state average weekly wage change was 0, it was a decrease actually, there's no change for TTD rates. I'll discuss that more during this session. So no changes there. So the state average weekly wage piece, there's no changes there. What we do have changes on, I'm going to scroll through our money chart. And again, everybody has money charts, so I just want to show you what's new. What we do have is updated life expectancy tables. OSIP, or the Office of Self-Insurance Plans, requires that the 2021 U.S. life tables be used for reserving lifetime benefits, either indemnity or medical, and this is the current one, the 2021, effective for this year. So reserving from 2024, this is the one you've got to use. And the no change to life pension benefits or rates, nothing there. Something to keep in mind though, when you look at the life pension, it's a wholly different maximum earnings for life pension than from PD or TD or anything else. So if you're dealing with life pension, take a look at this, because maybe you don't have a max life pension rate. And the final new update is the IRS has given us updated mileage reimbursement rates for 2024. The cost of gas continuing to go up. So we have that as well. So those are the new things that we have in our money chart, and they're on our website. It's a digital version. Tammy is sending those out as well. The physical hard copy yellow laminated ones, but just wanted to go through that. So I'm finished with that, and Tammy's going to ask us a couple of questions, I hope.
I am. Here we go. You should see the first poll question on your screen now. How many life pension PTD claims have you managed in the last 6 months? So you have 4 choices there: none, 1 to 2, 3 to 5, or 6 or more. I'm just going to give it a couple of seconds here. You guys are all veterans because you are voting very quickly here, so thank you. And don't worry if you didn't get the opportunity to answer. We're just trying to get an idea here. So I'm going to go ahead and close that and share the results here.
Okay. What is this under? Oh, it's under polls, huh? Okay, there it is. I can see it now. Thank you. Okay, so we have some experience. We have some with no experience. I'm hoping to have a little something for everybody in this session today. So thank you for responding to that. And I think we have one more.
We do. What is a uniform reduction? You have 4 choices again. PPD rate times 2/3. Weeks eliminated from the far end, $85 on life pension and $150 on PTD, or none of the above. What is a uniform reduction? Let me give you a couple extra seconds on this one.
And your responses to this help me understand what I should spend time explaining. And uniform reduction is something I'm going to spend some time explaining. So this tells me I should do that. So thank you for your responses. I see a number of good answers. The answer is the last one, none of the above, and 47% of you offered that as a response. So well done. But we have another group that will go through it. We'll talk about what a uniform reduction is. Okay, thank you, Tammy.
Thank you.
And away we go. Today we're going to talk about COLA and indemnity benefits. COLA stands for cost of living adjustment. We don't really have that in California work comp. We have an adjustment based solely on state average weekly wage changes. So we're going to talk about lifetime benefits and commutation. So we're going to talk a little bit about commutations. We're going to talk about COLA and lifetime benefits. And we're going to talk about attorney fees because that ends up being a factor in paying lifetime benefits because there's usually an attorney involved and the attorneys get paid from future benefits typically. So we have to worry about reductions. We've got to make sure those are calculated and address those properly. So we're paying the correct amount to the injured worker on lifetime benefits. So with that, as Tammy said, if you have questions, we're happy to try to answer them during the session. We've got a fairly large group today, so if we don't get to your question or you have additional questions after, feel free to send me an email either to me, Mussack at bradfordbarthel.com, or to that ratings at bradfordbarthel.com email address. Either of those, be glad to try to answer your question if you've got questions. One thing I did make note of when you were responding as to what sessions you'd like, what training sessions, is commutations. You're going to get a little bit here, but we do have additional training available in commutations, and that's something I do as well, and I'm happy to do those. Those are things I enjoy doing. So here we go. Cost of living adjustment, state average weekly wage. The DEU gets that from, actually the DIR gets that from the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor keeps statistics for average weekly wages for every state, and it's based, they collect that from unemployment insurance data that employers are sending to us. So they're collecting that. What we do for our COLA, for our cost of living adjustments in California work comp, is we take the state average weekly wage through the first quarter of last year, was 2023, and that's compared to the first quarter average weekly wages from the year before. So 23 compared to 22, and the difference, the percentage difference, is going to be our COLA. What we do in California is the determination is we're never going to reduce benefits. So if there's a decrease in state average weekly wage, we don't make changes based on COLA. And COLA affects a lot of different benefits, and it affects automatically minimum and maximum TTD rates, average weekly earnings, and TTD rates. So that's where we get updates on the average weekly earnings and TTD rates. Is based on state average weekly wage changes. The DIR typically notifies us September, October, November what it was for the prior year and what's going to be in effect for January 1st. So the COLA application is going to be effective January 1st. It's always January 1st. So TTD rates, if they change, will change January 1st, and TTD rates are based on date of injury. COLA also applies automatically to lifetime benefits, so 70% or more PD, so life pension or perm total benefits. COLA applies automatically, but there's a limitation. It's dates of injury of 2003 and later. So if you've got a really old case prior to 2003 date of injury, COLA does not apply. They're going to get the same rate year after year after year for as long as that benefit goes. But for 2003 and later dates of injury, COLA will apply, and you've got to look at that every year to see if there's a benefit change to be applied January 1st. So this past year in November, we got the DWC Newsline. It announced the rates for 2024 based on state average weekly wage data. And lo and behold, we had a decrease. It went down $9, the state average weekly wage, according to the Department of Labor data that they sent to us. So we have no change. We don't reduce it. They've determined we're not going to reduce benefits. We don't want TTD to go down. We don't want benefits to go down. So we have no change. So for 2024, we have the same TTD maximums and minimums as we did for 2023. So there you go. We got 2 years in a row with the same benefits. If we have a state average weekly wage increase effective this first quarter, then January 1st of 2025 will have an increase. But no changes to TTD for 2024. Here's our recent COLA history and state average weekly wage history. We've had a variety of range of, from 2020, it went up 3.84%. We had that huge increase in 2022, if you were around then, 13.5%. This year, zero. We had a decrease, a $9 a week decrease. So what that means is no changes for TTD, but what COLA can affect is death benefits. There's no change for this year because there's no change in TTD rates, but just to make you aware of, changes in TTD rate can affect death benefits. So that's something to keep in mind. It would impact it directly. There's not a direct application. You don't increase it by a certain percent, but TTD paid 2 years from the date of injury is paid at the current rates. So if you have someone that was a maximum or a minimum wage earner, it might affect their death benefit, their TTD benefit and death benefit rate. Death benefits are paid in the same manner as TTD. So that's how that could possibly affect that. Still capped by average weekly earnings at date of injury for death benefits. I'll talk about that more and show an example later. But here's what COLA directly affects every year is lifetime benefits once they've started. So that's 70% or greater. So that's perm total, the 100%ers, and that's life pension 70% or more after the PD is paid. Life pension benefits start. Reminder that it's a 1/1/2003 date of injury. So if you're administering a life pension or perm total case, here's what you got to know in a nutshell. We're going to talk more about COLA and benefits and commutations in that as we get further into the hour. But here's what you need to know if you're looking, what do I do with my life pension benefit or my perm total benefit? Because there was no change, no increase, the benefit before reduction does not change. So for lifetime benefits, for life pension and perm total, it's really best that you check the commutation method that was used on each specific case to address attorney fees for each specific case. So I referenced a uniform reduction. It's a method, but the amount is not uniform. It's going to differ from every case, depending on how those numbers work out with the commutation of attorney fees and when that commutation is done. So every case is going to have a different uniform reduction amount. I'm going to talk more about commutations and the different methodologies, but paying attorney fees, you're paying benefits up front. So these are benefits from the future. You're paying right now. The attorney gets their fee at the time of the settlement, time of the award, and those benefits are taken from the future of the lifetime benefit cases. And the DEU will calculate, and the DEU has commutation templates on their website that you can use for uniform reduction. What that means is you're getting the standard constant reduction from that weekly benefit that's intended to compensate or take care of the attorney fees and the little bit of interest that the employer gets or the insurer gets as a result of paying benefits up front. It's 3% per year is what the interest rate is built in to the commutation worksheets. That's not something different you have to calculate, although if you want to calculate what the individual interest savings are on your case, you do need to do some calculations, but it's built into the commutation. So the uniform reduction commutation method, again, that's one of the templates that the DU has on their website and you can use. Then you're getting a uniform reduction. There's also, if the DEU does the commutation of attorney fees for you at the WCAB, typically they will do that if a settlement or an award is being done and they're asked to do that. They will also give a uniformly increasing reduction calculation for commutation. What the uniformly increasing reduction method of commutation does is it makes the reduction start at a lower amount, but it increases uniformly for the duration of that benefit. The last several years, probably 5-10 years, that uniform increase is 3%. So that reduction goes up 3% every year. The DU, if they're doing the commutation, they show you the first few years, they calculated it out and show you what that 3% increase is, or the exact amount of that increasing reduction. That increasing reduction gets increased every January 1st. In this case, this year's case, there's no increase to the rate before reduction, but if you have a uniformly increasing reduction, that still increases, which results in a reduction of benefits to that injured worker. So when you're applying COLA for 2024, make sure you check or are aware of what that reduction method was on that lifetime benefit. If it's a uniform reduction that's constant, nothing. You don't change benefit at all. If it's a uniformly increasing reduction, that reduction goes up 3%. Typically, double check the individual commutation, but the last several years, it's been a 3% annual reduction increase. So check that, and if you've got a uniformly increasing reduction, that benefit's going to be reduced a little bit. It's not a lot, but it's a little bit. You want to make sure you're doing that correctly. So that's what you need to know for applying COLA to lifetime benefits this year. Know whether you've got a uniform reduction that's constant or you have a uniformly increasing reduction. I'm going to spend a little more time on that. As I said, the DEU will calculate that if it's done at the board. It's not, the uniformly increasing reduction is not part of their templates that they put on their website, because they believe it'll be done incorrectly often enough to be an issue. So they don't put it on their website, but they will do that calculation. The DEU doesn't decide which one you're going to use. That's typically going to be agreement between the parties. My recommendation, because of situations such as this year, the uniform constant reduction is probably the easier to administer, but know which one you have. Okay, I belabored that, but hopefully I made that clear. So I'm going to go back to the effects of COLA. TTD minimum and maximum benefits go. There's no, is that a question? I'm not seeing the whole question. For commutation, we do PPD STIPs where there's a lump sum with opportunities, and I'm not able to read the whole thing. It's a long question.
I'll help you.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions here.
Okay, let's see. Thank you.
So with 100% PD, do they receive a COLA on their benefits?
They do, yes. This year, no, because there's no increase. But yes, for 100% for perm total disability, yes, COLA applies to that every January 1st. This year, there's no increase, but you still got to look. And you got to look to see what type of commutation of those attorney fees you had. And those are the two choices: uniform reduction, which is a constant reduction, or the uniformly increasing reduction. It's going to be one of those two methods.
And then the commutation question is, when we do PPD STIPs, there is a lump sum with applicant attorney fees and ongoing payments beyond the lump sum. We were informed to do a commutation. Does this not apply to PD STIPs where there is no PTD or life pension?
That same commutation can be, but for a PD where there's no life pension or perm total, you may get from the far end. And what that does, that doesn't reduce the weekly benefit, but it's coming from the far end, so it's going to, the benefit will end sooner. So I'm making numbers up. So instead of 200 weeks of PD, maybe the last 30 are committed to the attorney and a little bit of interest. So instead of 200 weeks, you're going to pay 170 weeks of benefits. Again, I made those numbers up. They don't fit, but that's the theory behind that. That's what will happen with a less than lifetime benefit case. For PPD under 70%, you could get from the far end. You could also get by uniform reduction, so you have choices that way. But for a life pension, they don't do from the far end. They don't know what the far end is. They're doing life expectancies and who knows. But and they figure it's probably doesn't make good sense to stop a benefit while someone's still living. So the benefit continues for the life of that injured worker that's entitled to a life pension benefit or a perm total benefit. So hopefully I answered those.
You did. She said you did.
Good,
actually.
thank you.
And also, just a quick note, we did add a slide last minute, so I know some of you are following along on
I'm sorry.
On the hard copy, but yes, so the slide numbers are going to be a little bit off, or one number off, I should say. If
They're
you are
going to be one number off now. Which one did I add? I
14.
added number 14. Yes. So we're off one. So number 14 was popped in there. That was a new slide I added without letting Tammy know. Sorry about that. So here we're one slide off. Sorry. TTD benefits. The 2-year rule is something to remember with TTD benefits and also with death benefits, and I'll explain that. TTD benefits paid 2 years after the date of injury are subject to the maximum and minimum earnings at the time of payment. So if you denied TD and 2.5 years later, trial says, you know what, you owe TD, this was compensable and you owe TD, you got to pay based on maximums at the time you're making the payment. Still subject to the earnings of the injured worker, but if the injured worker was a maximum, beyond maximum, you gotta look at what the current maximum so it's still subject to 2/3 of the average weekly earnings as a cap, but you're paying it based on maximum and minimum TD rates at the time that you're making the payment. And Labor Code 4656, just reminder for that one. That's kind of for me because I keep forgetting you can get it more than 104 weeks of TTD for some injury. So something to remember on that. So here's how TTD rates have gone. They've been going up based on state average weekly wage changes, no change for 2024. Death benefits, COLA does not apply directly to death benefits. It might indirectly affect death benefits because death benefits are to be paid in the same manner as TTD. So if the TTD would have gone up, based maybe the decedent's earnings are far above maximum or below minimum, it could affect the benefits that are paid to the dependents. again, capped at 2/3 of the average weekly earnings, but death benefits might be affected by increases in TTD rates. Just remember that. So it's 2 years after the date of injury is when you look at that. It's not necessarily January 1st. The first time you're looking at TTD and death benefits for that impact on rate is 2 years from the date of injury, and then it's every January 1st. There's a recent panel
Can I clarify a couple things there?
Yes.
We have a couple questions on that.
Sure.
Okay,
Mhm.
so if it is if the 2015 claim denied TD, in 2022 TD found compensable, we pay the current TD rate for 2022.
You still got to look at the average weekly earnings for that specific injured worker. 2/3 of that average weekly earnings is your max. But if that person was above, let's say that person was making $5,000 a week, you've got to adjust it to the current maximums and minimums. So it's not a direct application. It's still capped at 2/3 of the average weekly earnings of that individual. And the same for death benefits. It's capped at 2/3 of the average weekly earnings. Did that clarify that at all?
That got it. If they were under max, is it still 2/3 of the 2015 wages?
Correct. Unless they were below minimum, then you're kicking up the minimum. That doesn't happen often. But yes, then you're still doing 2/3. I have a death benefit example I show later if we get to it, but maybe we won't. But that answers the question, I hope. Is there another question? Okay, I'm going to go over back to the death benefits. COLA does not apply directly to death benefits, but it might indirectly affect the benefits because you're paying it as TTD, and possibly, not always, but possibly the TTD rate changed and affects that benefit. But it's confirmed by law, by case law, that COLA does not apply to death benefits, and it was recently revisited, a WCA panel decision, and reaffirmed that, yep, that's it. Death benefits, the 2-year rule. So again, I talked about this, but I'm going to hammer it home. Labor Code 4661.5 is the 2-year rule. It's not called a 2-year rule, but TTD and consequently death benefits paid more than 2 years past date of injury are subject to average weekly earnings maximums and minimums at the time of the payment of that benefit. So it's not a COLA applied to that individual case. It's COLA applied to the TTD maximums and minimums that might affect the benefit you're paying. Death benefits, going through death benefits again, just one unique thing about death benefits I didn't say before, there's a different minimum rate for death benefits, so that might be something to keep in mind if you're actually paying death benefits. If you have a new death benefit claim, I'm going to go off the COLA topic, but death benefits, they don't come up very often, thank goodness. We are a much safer workplace than we were in the past, but anytime you have a death claim, I think it's worthwhile to look up all the laws because you're not going to see it often, and there's no way to remember everything that we do. You just can't. So it's best to look at it because sometimes there's some different things in there you might not expect. Okay, so death benefits, I kind of hammered this home. So here's an example of how death benefits might be affected or might not be affected, and the same holds true for TTD benefits that might be affected, might not be affected. So for an example on death benefits, or let's say it's a TTD benefit that's not paid initially. But so for a 7/8/2016 injury and death, I've got 2 examples to show you how those will work. One of them, average weekly earning is $1,200. Times 2/3 is 800, so that's the TTD rate. That's below the maximum TTD rate from that year, I believe. And for the next one, it's a $2,100 a week average weekly earnings. 2/3 of that is $1,400. So here's what happens. 2016, for that first example, $1,200 a week, there's no change. So even though TTD rates go up, the average maximums and minimums go up, in this example, there is no change because the 2/3 of the 1,200 is 800, and that 800 and 1,200 are not affected by increases in maximum and minimum. The next example, 2,100 a week, we're going to get some effect. In 2016, the maximum TTD rate was 1128. So that's the maximum that person can be paid for death benefits or TTD that year. 2017, it went up. The TTD rate went up. So that could present an increase. 2 years after the date of injury is when you worry about the initial increase. So in 2018, it went up again. 2 years from the date of injury, that benefit would go up. So I hope that makes sense. 2019, it went up again. It's still under the 1,400 that is 2/3 of the average weekly earnings for this particular individual. 2020, it goes up again, and they go up after the initial one, 2 years after date of injury. They're going up every January 1st when COLA applies. Finally, in 2022, it hits the maximum for that individual based on earnings of 2,100. So I hope that example shows that, and then it's capped at that 1,400 because of it's based on 2/3 of the average weekly earnings. So for TTD and death benefits, that's how COLA can affect, and when it maxes out, when you no longer are going to apply, COLA no longer affects TTD or death benefits. Lifetime benefits, I just want to go through, it's decided at the California Supreme Court level that COLA does not apply until that benefit starts or should have started. So you don't go retroactive. I recently had someone ask me about that they were being asked to calculate retroactive. Life pension was going to start for another year. Could we calculate what that life pension rate would be with the COLA increases? No, you can't. It doesn't apply until that benefit starts. What that does mean, though, is perm total, seems like rarely do we expect perm total or 100% PD, so we end up having to go back to figure out when perm total starts and apply COLA from that past start date that we didn't know we were going to start perm total benefits. So that's different from starting to calculate from date of injury. It's a perm total we're going to start putting COLA on now. We don't do that. COLA starts at the January 1st after that lifetime benefit begins, not before. You don't start calculating it, you don't start increasing it until after that benefit begins, and then that January 1st and every January 1st thereafter for lifetime benefits. Commutations. Commutations play a role in figuring out what benefits you're going to pay on going on lifetime cases, because there's typically an attorney involved and the attorney is getting fees of some sort. If there isn't an attorney and there's no fees to pay up front, no attorney fees to pay up front, then you don't need a commutation. You're paying that benefit for the duration of that injured worker's life. But most of the time, when a case is that significant, there's typically attorneys involved to make sure everything's done right. And if there's attorneys involved, there's going to be a commutation. The attorney's going to get some fees, and that fees are coming from the injured worker's benefits. If it's a lifetime case, they're coming out of future benefits, and they're coming a little bit out of each, maybe a lot, out of the weekly benefit. They're coming out weekly. There's no way to project from the far end for a lifetime benefit. They're coming out by a reduction, a weekly reduction. Commutations just checking my time. I got a little bit of time. Commutations technically require WCAB approval. So if somebody's asking you, give me $5,000 up front, technically that requires WCAB approval, because technically it's supposed to be in the best interest of the injured worker, and the WCAB has jurisdiction over that. Labor Code 5101 says, and has always said, interest credit for a commutation is 3% a year. It's built into the commutation template, so you're getting 3% a year for paying benefits up front, built into those templates. So they calculate the effect when you do a commutation, or the DEU does a commutation, or somebody does a commutation using those DEU templates. 3% interest credit is taken out, and it calculates the effect of that advance payment, that attorney fees, because you're paying the attorney fees now. You're not paying them over time. They're getting it now from future benefits, typically, for a lifetime case, always. So those templates calculate the effect of the future benefits and that 3% annual interest credit. So after payment in advance of benefits for the injured worker, even though it's going to an attorney or some other source, there's an effect on future benefits. The two choices are, I'm going back to PD under 70%, where there's a fixed number of weeks. There's two options: are weekly reduced benefit, or the benefit ends sooner from the far end. Reminder, you can't take it from the far end of a lifetime. So here I'm talking about just PD under 70%. So there's two choices on commutations, and kind of look at it this way. For fixed benefits, for the PD of 1 to 99%, it's a number of weeks. So it's a fixed number of weeks associated with each permanent disability amount and each year of that injury. So there's a fixed number of weeks, even though the rate may differ. It's a fixed number of weeks. Lifetime benefits, there isn't a fixed number of weeks. You pay it for life. 70% or more, you're paying it for life after any permanent partial disability is paid. Actually, it's after the number of weeks of any permanent partial disability is paid. Perm total, 100% PD, begins at MMI. So often we don't know we're going to get a perm total, so we have to go back and retroactively calculate those accrued amounts. We may have been paying at $290 a week and find out it's perm total, and we should have been paying at $1,200 a week, with COLA applying every January 1st. So I'm going back to commutations, and this does not apply to lifetime benefits, but for a smaller level of PD that's maybe accrued and not paid because the injured worker went back to the same job, and by law you don't have to pay that until it's settled. For some of those, it may be enough has been accrued to pay attorney fees out of that, and you don't need to do a commutation. That's very rare. Most of the time, they're coming out of future benefits. If it's less than 70% PD, actually, if it's a permanent partial, it could be off the far end or by uniform reduction. And I mentioned the uniformly increasing reduction. Just be aware of that. Typically, you're not ordered to use that method. Typically, it's agreement. So make a decision. If it hasn't been decided yet, make a decision, whatever you feel suits your company best. But in my opinion, the uniform reduction that is constant is easier to administer and easier to make sure we get the right amount to that injured worker week after week after week after week. If you have a life pension case, you're going to have, and there's an attorney involved, you're going to have two different commutations. You're going to have a commutation for attorney fees based on the permanent partial disability, and you're going to have a commutation based on attorney fees on the life pension portion of the award. The DEU will calculate those for you if you want. The DU calculates attorney fees based on present value of that benefit, and they have calculators for that. So they're not taking the full value, they're taking a present value, and typically 15%, although that's not fixed either, but typically 15% of present value is attorney fees, and the DU will calculate that if asked. So just a reminder about that. You may have two different calculations. If you've got life pension, make sure you're checking that one for COLA application, whether that's a uniformly increasing reduction or a constant uniform reduction. So check those on that. Even though there's two separate commutations, the attorney fees can be paid at the same time, but the same check, but they are separate portions. Yes, I think I have another question.
We do. We have a lot. So I'm just going to give you a couple of them.
Ooh, okay.
If PTD is due in 2012, wouldn't the
TTD or
COLA start?
PTD?
It says PTD.
TTD? Okay.
P as in Paul, T as
Okay.
in Tammy. D.
Oh, P as in Paul, PTD. Okay, 2012.
Yes. Wouldn't the COLA start as of 1/1/13?
It would. It would.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So that's when it should have. That's when the benefit should have started.
Great.
I may have
And then
misspoken
this one
earlier.
here is a little bit longer.
Okay.
Because death benefits are to be paid in the same manner as TTD rates under Labor Code 4702B, shouldn't the minimum now for death benefits be 242.86 instead of 224, regardless of what the Labor Code says?
You could. I think that's a legal question. I think since it's written in the law that there's a different minimum for death benefits, I think that's a tough one to overcome. And I will tell you that I have heard personal experience with the WCAB, with a judge awarding a higher than minimum death benefit because the judge felt that was not right. So hopefully I answered that.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay. Okay, so with commutations, what I really just want to make sure that I point out is if you've got, let's say, 75% PD and then life pension after that, if that commutation for the attorney fees on that 75% PD is from the far end, that's making that benefit end sooner, and there will be a gap before life pensions due. I want to point that out. I want to make you aware of that. So in my opinion, if your PD is over 70% or going to get close to it, you probably don't want to look at commutation off the far end. You probably want to do the PPD commutation by uniform reduction. In my opinion, that's tough on the injured worker to have the benefits stop entirely for some period of time. So again, but be aware there's a difference. Whatever the parties involved agree on is the right thing to do, but be aware there's a difference, and there can be a gap in benefits if you're doing the PD off the far end. It could be a gap before that life pension starts. Okay, I just did a quick summary here on state average weekly wage and COLA, the effects on benefits, commutations of attorney fees. You got to pay attention to that. Payments of benefits in advance, that's what a commutation is. And because of that, it reduces future benefits, either weekly or from the far end. And there's interest credit applies to that. COLA applies only to dates of injury 1/1/2003 thereafter, and PD of 70% or more. So whether the life pension or the perm total. The reduction method, what the DU will do, will put in their commutation sheets, if they do it for you, is they give the instructions that the claims person is advised that COLA applies to the rate before reduction, and then you do the reduction. So you don't apply it to the reduced rate, you apply it to the rate before reduction. For 2024, there's no change. For 2024, it's a uniformly increasing reduction. That reduction increases even though the rate before reduction does not, resulting in a reduced benefit to the recipient for 2024. So look at that commutation that applies to that specific case. Separate attorney fees for the permanent partial and for the life pension. And just a reminder that off the far end makes that benefit end sooner. Commutation, I'm talking just a little bit about commutations. I've got 1251 is what I'm showing, so I'm going to try to go through a couple of things here on commutations. I believe I'm going specifically on commutations. There's a template that the DU has on their website, and there are this many A, B, C, D, E, F, G worksheets within the Excel workbook for that. If you're doing lifetime benefits, you need life expectancy tables, and I did not update this. It's 2021 is the life expectancy tables we're using for during this year. You have to use the 2024. If you're doing a commutation with the DU commutation template and instructions that's on the DU's website, there are tables for doing the commutation. There's a table 1 which applies to all fixed benefits, so the PPD all the way up to 99%, you're using table 1. If you're doing for a lifetime benefit, you use either table 3 for a male or table 3 for a female. Different life expectancies for males and females. So the instructions are all there in the DU website, and the commutations are there. So if you ever want to venture trying to do one of those or look at one of those, just giving you a brief overview of what it is. So here's what the different methods that the DU has on their Excel workbook that you can use. A couple of these are not helpful anymore in that the life pension ones do not have any potential for applying COLA. You cannot do an increasing amount. You can get a uniform reduction, but you can't get a commutation of all remaining life pension, because that would require some consideration of future COLA projections. And these tables on the website were created in 2001 before we had COLA, so there's no way to apply them there. So those are not useful to us anymore. But what we can use for PPD is A, B, and C. All remaining PD is A, and the DU does that to get present value to calculate attorney fees. You can get off the far end, and you can get by uniform reduction. For life pension, you can do a calculation of uniform reduction. You can't get calculations of present value or full values because COLA is not in there. The uniform reduction really doesn't matter based on increasing COLA. What it does is it gives you a uniform reduction based on the remaining period of time that is projected for life expectancy for that individual and the amount of the attorney fee or whatever you're commuting. So the reduction does not change. It could be $400 a week or $200 a week for the same individual, the same period of time, same life expectancy, same attorney fees, and the reduction will be the same. I probably made that more unclear than it should have been, but my point is the uniform reduction ones are still valid and still can give you a valid amount of a reduction. When you are doing calculating future benefits and reserving things you need to make sure you have accurate. If you're doing a commutation or you're doing an award for that matter, you want to make sure you've got accurate information such as the date of injury, average weekly earnings, PD start date. That's really important in paying benefits and doing commutations. There's a data entry field for PD start date, And it's important that be accurate, because otherwise none of the calculations will be accurate. I'm going to keep going here, and just a reminder about, because I'm running out of time, and I think I'm out of this here too. So I'll give you an example of what COLA affects on life pension. So here we've got an example, 2007 date of injury, and some of these numbers are made up, but the premise is still accurate. 83% PD start in 2008. Life pension starts at 177.81. So here's what the top of the commutation worksheet is going to look like. The data that needs to be inputted on it is 20,449 in attorney fees. And here's what the body of that commutation worksheet looks like. And down here in section 5, this calculates what the uniform reduction would be, $39.14. The start rate is 177.81 minus 39.14. So here's what we do. Here's what the uniform increasing reduction, what the DEU might give you if they're doing that calculation. I wanted to get to the example. Here's what an example of a uniform increasing reduction might look like. It goes up, in this particular example, it went up 3% a year. Typically, they're going to go up 3% a year, although you're going to get different reduction amounts to start with. Every case is unique. A uniform reduction doesn't mean that it's the same reduction. It means it's the same reduction for that case, but every case is unique. And okay, here's what I wanted to show, is what happens with the uniform constant reduction. It's not going to apply this year because the rate did not go up, the rate before reduction, but that the DEU instructs us to do is that you apply COLA to the rate before reduction. So for 2021, on this example with the 177.81 start rate, 39.14 was the uniform reduction. You apply COLA to the rate before reduction and then subtract. You apply COLA to the rate before reduction and then subtract. 2023, you apply COLA to the rate before reduction and then subtract. So that's the process. For this year, there's no change. So it's the same rate before reduction with 0% increase and the same reduction. So that's how those are done. And I am going to stop there and see if I have another question or so.
I think you've answered most of them, or they're more on the legal side of things. Looks like one just came in. Maybe we'll do this one last one since we have a few minutes.
Let's do that.
If the parties agree to AWE for TD rate on 100% and COLA is adjusted per SAWW change yearly, is that a uniform reduction?
Is it a uniform reduction? No, the reduction would be based on whatever is calculated for paying attorney fees on that. So if you agree to the average weekly earnings for 100% PD, that's standard. You get your TTD rate is the initial rate of perm total, is the initial TTD rate, is the start rate. Whatever the attorney fees calculate out to is going to be your uniform reduction. And typically, the DEU can do that calculation. You can also do it on the one of those life pension ones by uniform reduction. But no, there's going to be a reduction for the attorney fees. And so you're going to do the TTD rate is the initial start rate minus whatever that reduction is for that particular case based on that particular attorney fee for that particular life expectancy of that individual. You're subtracting that. January 1st, you're applying COLA to that TTD rate, subtracting that same reduction, uniform reduction, and that's what you're going to pay.
Thank you, Tim. And unfortunately, that's all we have time for. But if you still have a question that you would like to have answered by Tim, his contact information is going to be on your screen in just a second. Oh, it's already there. I apologize. So his contact information is there, so you can email him directly, or you can email our ratings department directly, and we have several raters, and any one of them will be able to help with your questions as well. So a couple of final things. I know some people had some issues signing in today and called in on the phone. If you're an adjuster, I'll go ahead and give you credit if you just shoot me an email. But I have asked everyone who's emailed me, and I haven't gotten back to everybody yet, but to just talk to your IT department so you can fix it in our future webinars, so I can just have a record of your attendance. But specifically Broadspire, it looks like there was some kind of issue on the Broadspire side of things today, because I got emails from like 12 of your adjusters. So don't worry, Broadspire, just shoot me an email. I'm Tammy Welty, twelty@bradfordbarthel.com. That's TWELTY @bradfordbarthel.com, and I'll help you guys out. Thank you for attending. And then a couple of final things. Certificates for CE and MCLE will be emailed today. I will include a link to the PowerPoint, and I will also include a copy of that cheat sheet, because a lot of you have been asking for it. So I'll make sure I include both of those. Our February webinar will be announced soon via email, so be on the lookout for that. And again, if we didn't get to your question today, because there were a lot of them, go ahead and email our ratings department at ratings@bradfordbarthel.com. And again, Tim or one of our raters will answer that. I hope you all have a wonderful January, and thank you so much for joining us at the beginning of the year. Have a great rest of your week, everybody.
Thank you all very much.